Still to come, Maeve Boothby O'Neill. She died at just aged 27, absolutely awful, from malnutrition after living for more than a decade with the debilitating condition ME. But her mother says her death was wholly preventable. We'll be speaking to her next.
Now then, the mother of a very young woman who died from malnutrition due to severe ME, she died at just 27, her whole life in front of her, says that this death was completely preventable. And she wants to see institutional change in the way that patients with ME are cared for within the NHS.
Well, Maeve Boothby O'Neill had lived with the condition that can affect physical and mental activity for a decade before she died, confined to her bed and unable to eat. Well, Maeve's mum, Sarah Boothby, joins us now, alongside medical advisor to the ME Association, Dr Charles Shepherd. Sarah, coming back, I want to start at the very beginning, because it's still not really understood, is it? Tell us about Maeve. When did things start to... as a mum, we always know when there's something wrong. When did you start suspecting that there was something wrong, and what was happening to her?
We both had a mild viral infection. I was the first to get it, and then she, as soon as I started to get better, she came down with it. It lasted for exactly 29 days, because I was counting, because I needed to get back to work. So when she came down with it, I thought, oh, crikey, so that's 29 days if it's the same thing that I've had. And it was exactly the same.
And how old was she at that point?
She was 12 then.
Right.
So I made a complete recovery. Seemed that she'd made a complete recovery too. It was the end. It was the summer end of summer term. Really busy summer holiday. She was 13 that summer, August birthday. A party on the beach, pink champagne with her dad in London. Her first sibling with her dad's new wife in London. You know, really exciting time. And she came back home from that to Dartmoor, where we lived, and we'd moved back into our old house. So it was really, really, really busy time. And she said, I'm feeling really tired, Mum. And I said, OK, it's not surprising. Stay in bed. Just have a day in bed. Yeah. And she said, she didn't tell me, but she wrote in her teenage diary, which I discovered after she died, Mum says, I've got to stay in bed, you know, like, I don't want to be there. She was so healthy all her life that when she had chickenpox as a toddler, I didn't even notice. So I found a pock mark later, thinking, how did I miss that, you know? Because she was just very active and healthy.
So here we are, she's 12, she's had to go back to bed. And was there ever a period of remission where you thought she was getting better and that she was getting her you know, energy back? And
this is where ME is just every patient, every individual is different. And we are all different. So, of course, illness will look different depending upon who you are. And who Maeve was a very bright, very, I mean, exceptionally able cognitively. So the answer to your question is no, she never had remission. She just very, very slowly, from 12 to 27, went downhill.
But what do you do when you go to the doctors? I mean, you've got symptoms. Can you remember the first time you took her to the doctors and what you were told?
Yeah, all too well. The first thing that we were told was the GP, because, you know, after a month of being tired every day, it's like, this isn't right. We went to the GP. The GP said, at 13, let's see how things go. Let's not medicalise this too soon.
Right.
So that's exactly what we did. And she'd already started falling over in PE, and the PE teacher would call me to collect her because, you know, she was in the sick room. I had to go and pick her up. And then that was the next progression, really, from the saying she was tired all the time, was that she'd just collapse. I mean, not fainting. She would still be conscious, but her legs would just go.
When did she stop eating?
Oh, that was really sudden and very unexpected. So
involuntary. It wasn't that she decided to stop eating.
No, she just didn't have the energy.
It was the same with just falling over. You know, she wanted to be active. She was a dancer, you know, she loved to dance, and she had to stop all of that. So by the time it had progressed to her not being able to eat, the first thing was she just couldn't chew.
God.
So she'd already got to the point where she couldn't get out of bed for more than an hour a day.
Sorry, can I just ask you?
Hours, yeah.
When you say she couldn't chew, do you mean that it was painful for her to chew, or that she didn't have the energy to chew?
She didn't have the energy.
Wow.
So what it's
that
like...
bad?
it's like you've got muscles that work by themselves. You can't help that, like a swallow or a blink.
Or breathing,
you don't have to think about it. It just happens. And then there are things that you tell your body to do. It's like, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to run, I'm going to eat a meal.
Chew.
Exactly. I'm going to swallow. And she didn't lose her swallow, but she couldn't chew. So there's me. I was working part-time. We were all in lockdown, so that was great for me because it meant I could work from home. I worked every other day so that I could look after her on the days that I wasn't working. And I thought, OK, 24 hours, nothing can go that badly wrong. I'll be able to, if there's a disaster, I'll pick it up when I'm not at work.
What a strain on you.
I was also going to say, you're seeing all of this unfold.
Yeah.
What were you being told by doctors was the issue? I mean, what did they label it as? I mean, you must have been asking, what is this, what is this, what is this? Was there any point when you were told, and many mothers do, this is you, this is you projecting something, or this is her, it's a mental problem?
It was, I mean, I've got quite a good sense of humour. Maeve had an excellent sense of humour. It was hilarious the way we were treated, because she went to, after being, let's not medicalise it, let's just see how it goes. She then was referred to a paediatrician. We saw a paediatrician for 2 years. And most of that time, so once a month for 2 years, she discharged herself twice from that because it was a complete waste of time. No offence to the paediatrician, but we spent all the time with him giving us a kind of lecture on her single-parent family background, her high-achieving status at school. She needed to lower her expectations.
Wow. All right, let's turn to Dr. Shepherd here. Dr. Shepherd, the way this is coming across, it's just a terrible slow-motion catastrophe. Could it have been stopped?
Morning, Richard. Yes, I mean, as we've heard at this inquest into the tragic death of Maeve, Maeve realised that she was possibly starving to death. Her parents knew that this was happening. Her GP knew that this was happening, and she did actually try her best, I think, to do something about this. But there was no coordinated care and management plan in place to look after Maeve, both at home and in hospital. And I think if that plan had been in place and they had taken advice from Dr. William Weir, for instance, one of the experts in dealing with patients who are very severely affected and are in hospital, I think if that advice had been taken and this plan had been there, then this very tragic death could have been avoided. Sadly, a small number of people do die from ME, but people with ME should not be dying from malnutrition.
No. I was going to ask Dr. Shepherd, do you think, by and large, the average GP, the average person in, practitioner, what have you, doesn't really have a grip on what ME is? Once upon a time, it was all put down to the patient. It was something in their head and what have you. Has that stigma ever really left?
In some parts of the medical profession, sadly, it hasn't. And this is, it's largely an historical thing. I was at medical school quite a long time ago, about 50 years ago now, and I was taught that this illness was all hysterical nonsense, go away and forget about it. And that's what a certain generation of doctors have believed. And then it went through a phase when, OK, the medical profession believed it was an illness, but it was a psychological illness. It was an all-in-the-mind illness which needed treated by psychiatry. And this is where, Sarah has indicated she was told by the doctor, don't medicalise the problem. And that's been one of the problems of trying to get, good management, good diagnosis of this condition. So, we do now have a new nice guideline. I was a member of the committee that produced this guideline, and we produced recommendations which are very, very clear on when people should be suspecting a diagnosis of ME, and this is, as Sarah has described with Maeve, previously fit young adults. They get a viral infection. They don't recover from that infection. They remain unwell. They have debilitating fatigue, problems with brain function. And then if you don't recognise it early on, provide good management. We haven't got a drug to treat it, but if you can provide good management early on with symptoms, And then hopefully you can stop this progression into this very severe state, which round about 25% of people are in, where
And COVID,
they have
am I right
not
in
only
thinking
severe problems.
Sorry, I was going to say, am I right in thinking, we were talking about this before,
Yeah.
long COVID is something that has really... You talk about infections. Does long COVID fall into that, what could cause ME bracket?
Yes, there's an awful lot of overlap between long COVID and ME/CFS. I mean, long COVID's a complicated picture. There's people with long COVID who have got organ damage to their hearts, their lungs from the initial COVID infection. They've been in hospital. They've got damage to organs which may not recover from, and that's why they're breathless and whatever. But a large proportion of people with long COVID have got these classic ME symptoms of the debilitating fatigue, post-exertional symptom exacerbation, cognitive dysfunction, problems with control of pulse and blood pressure. We think round about half of people with long COVID who've got a diagnosis of long COVID actually meet a diagnosis of ME/CFS as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of people been developing an ME/CFS-like illness as a result of COVID.
Doctor, I'm very sorry, we're almost out of time, but just a sort of a double-barrel question to finish with. It's clear from what you've said that Maeve's malnutrition could and should have been managed and allowed her to fight another day, as it were. And that leads me to the million-dollar question. Is there a cure for ME?
We don't have a cure, Richard. There's as I say, there's no drug treatment for this condition at the moment, but there's an awful lot that doctors can do if they can make an early and accurate diagnosis in providing good management advice to patients. And there is quite a lot of research, and this is piggybacking now off long COVID into a number of potential drug treatments, looking at the different things that we know are going wrong in ME/CFS. There's problems with the way energy is produced in muscle, there's problems in the brain, there's problems with the immune system. So there's a whole range of drugs now being looked at in long COVID because the same pathology seems to be there in long COVID. Yes. And hopefully this information will help us with the management of people with ME.
Dr.
It's
Shepherd.
I was going to say thank you so much. Sorry, thank you so much, Dr. Shepherd. But final word from you. It's taken Maeve, losing Maeve, and the inquest and the report. What would you say to people who might have a diagnosis of ME, are watching this and are very scared?
Thank you so much for asking me that question, because that's really why I wanted to be here, is to offer some reassurance. Maeve didn't have to die, but she did. And from her death, it has been learnt how to manage very severe ME. That's when you can't eat. So there's a distinction between severe and very severe. Once you get to the point where you can't eat, then you can be treated at home. You don't have to go into hospital more than just the once.
With intravenous feeding?
With whatever is the correct tube to prevent you from developing malnutrition. ME patients who are that poorly are already going to be likely to be undernourished anyway, because part of the presentation is not being able to digest food. So there's already an issue, and as soon as that person... I'm so glad you asked me, because the headlines through the inquest have been really scary.
They are terrifying, yeah.
I don't want people to be afraid. They
You're
can
saying now
be
there is,
treated.
sadly, because of you losing Maeve, there's become more awareness. And so there is hope, and people probably can refer back to her case, and maybe even medics can look at the doctors who worked with her, who hopefully have learned
right.
Yes.
I'm so glad. I mean, amongst all the pain, I'm so glad that there's
so
a
am
good...
I, because Maeve was a good person.
She looks
and
gorgeous.
she didn't want to die.
No.
And I mean, when I say good, she was modest and generous and very intelligent. And if her death gives a bit of that back to the world, then her legacy is of doing something good.
Sarah,
so the thing to do is to contact the hospital where Maeve was treated.
Which was?
Which was the Royal Devon, it's changed the name, Royal Devon University Hospital Trust.
Okay.
Go direct to them and they will help anybody who is
That's an incredibly useful piece of information.
Thank you.
I'm glad we ended with that. And
Thank you.
your daughter sounds wonderful. She sounds a wonderful person. Thank you so much for coming in, Sarah. Well, look, we've had a response from NHS England. They've said this to us. Improvements, they concede, are needed within the health service and across society to increase understanding and awareness of ME. And over the coming months, this is what they say, we are going to be working closely with the government, with patients and clinicians on the final delivery plan for ME. It's got a title. The final delivery plan for ME, and we will achieve these ambitions.